Over the weekend, the protests, which have already been continuing for many weeks, received just another example of why they're so important, with more needless murders. And so we want to talk you through one of them. It involves Rayshard Brooks, which I'm sure you've heard about. On Friday night, a police officer shot and killed a 27-year-old black man, this is Rayshard Brooks, outside Atlanta Wendy's drive-thru. The shooting followed a struggle that began after Brooks failed sobriety tests. An autopsy conducted afterward found that he suffered 2 gunshot wounds to his back, and he died of organ injuries and blood loss. And the reason that he suffered gunshot wounds to his back was because he was running away from the police when they decided, no, we're not going to let him get away, and we're certainly not going to chase him, so we're going to put down the tasers, and we're going to start firing live ammunition at him. And he died completely needlessly. No one's life was at risk. It is exactly what everyone has been trying to get people to accept. This is the reality of policing. You inconvenience the police, and they will begin shooting, and a man's life has been lost.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And of course, we have to remember why Rayshard was apprehended in the first place, which was for sleeping in his car. And then they say that he, failed a sobriety test, but that's probably why he was sleeping in his car. Mm-hmm. He wasn't driving. I mean, arguably, it is the responsible thing to do. Sleep in your car, sleep it off anyway. And I think what a lot of folks who've seen these videos, you've read about the case, you know that Rayshard was apprehended by the police and was speaking very calmly to them, and that things only got heated when they actually tried to arrest him. And again, once again, why? What was he? Who was he harming? He was not driving the vehicle. Mm-hmm. If they could give him a citation, they could, at most, right? But they didn't have to arrest him. So even then, the premise of his arrest is suspect.
100%. They could have sent him home. They could have put him in an Uber. And the thing is, like, there are so many examples where if you just change the one variable, the fact that he's black, that is exactly what they would do. If it had been me that had fallen asleep outside a Wendy's, they would not have tried to arrest me. They wouldn't have tased me. If I ran, they certainly wouldn't have shot me. Like, all of it hinges on one specific fact, the fact that he's black. That's it. And look, I've already seen the response from some to this whole thing, and there's always the excuses. He struggled. Oh, he had a taser, even though they always tell us they're totally non-lethal. So apparently no cop was actually at risk with him having a taser. It's an excuse to get to the point where you can say it's okay that they murdered him. And then you just think of the obvious follow-up questions. Okay, so what if I went up and punched a cop in the face? Does he get to shoot me in the head? Mm-hmm. No, obviously he doesn't. But there's a significant portion of the population that thinks, well, maybe not you, but maybe some people. Maybe if the cop felt like, what if you were going to punch him again and break his skull open? What if he was scared for his life because someone wasn't doing exactly what the cops wanted? That is reason enough to murder him. And that is really the divide that we're addressing right now. It is Absolutely. A system, a murderous system, that a significant chunk of the population thinks, so long as the violence is predominantly against people who don't look like me, it is totally okay that they respond to even minor inconveniences with murderous force.
Absolutely. And I think, Ilhan Omar has pointed out that this is not about training. It's not about learning how to de-escalate a situation. Police officers know how to de-escalate a situation, and they do it all the time when they're apprehending white people. And John's absolutely right. I mean, I think a lot of people know, white people know that. I remember when I found out that some rich white people get escorted home by the police if they're drunk. I'm saying like a tailing you home, making sure you get safely into your garage, like all but tucking you in. I mean, the kind of discrepancy and the disparity between how black and white people are treated in this country. I mean, it is all mask off. And I think for me, the thing about this case that is truly the most upsetting is that they should have just let him get away.
Yeah.
Let him get.
You got his car. You know who he is.
Exactly. Take the L on this one. Why? Because he struggled. He got out of 2 cops who were armed, right? Who had like batons. They could have had used a baton. He struggled. He got out. He ran away. So be it. The dude was sleeping in his car. You lost. You didn't follow him because you're lazy. It's an L. He wasn't going to hurt anyone. His car's right there. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. But that's not how they respond. And like, so we're focusing on this case. It is an absolute tragedy. The story is continuing to unfold. But there are any number of cases from just over this weekend that are just as bad. There was at least one other case of a cop kneeling on a black man's neck. The guy saying he eventually died. The guy whose neck was being knelt on said, "I can't breathe." Cop said, "I don't care." It's like during all of this, a wave of protest brought on by that exact situation, they're still doing not just things, they're doing the exact thing that they did to George Floyd. The cops, it's not just that they can't learn, and I would say the evidence of the past few decades imply that it is difficult to train them, but that they don't want to. There isn't a cop in America who doesn't know that right now, when a black man says, "I can't breathe because your neck is on my neck," that the wrong response is, "I don't care." They all know it, but he still said it. And by the way, No, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a system designed specifically to criminalize black Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I saw, I think Doug Holland in the comments said, "Is there video?" There is a lot of video in this case. There's body cam footage, which suspiciously doesn't include the actual killing, oddly enough. There's Wendy surveillance footage, and there's also cell phone footage. The reason that we're not showing it is because, and I'm not articulating sort of a general principle going forward, but I just can't right now. I can't. And I saw Rayshard's wife said that she can't watch the footage because she's already dreading the funeral and having to explain to his kids. He has a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-year-old, as well as a 13-year-old stepson, that she just can't take seeing it. And I think a lot of us feel that way. It's just too much. And we know what it is. The footage shows it. Not the original footage, but footage that has come out shows he gets away. He's running away. They shoot him in the back multiple times.
Right.
And so if you feel that you need to see that footage, it is available. I will also say the police officer who killed Brooks has been fired. Another officer involved in the shooting has been placed on administrative duty, so bear that in mind.
And the police chief immediately resigned.
Exactly.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that more than likely would have happened a month ago. The Wendy's has been burned down, although it is questionable exactly who did. There's a video going around implying that it was actually a white woman, but I can't tell from the footage exactly. But anyway, know that the Wendy's apparently has been burned. So there's that. And anyway,
I mean, this is the thing is like, this is the thing about when you look at these cases and the fact that they still keep happening despite the overwhelming amount of protests, the multitude of people, the polling on this, the people who want real reform. Then you look at the demand to defund the police, and it's not radical. It's not radical at all, right? And I think the real thing is, demand to defund the police, keep cutting. We'll tell you when it's okay.
Exactly.
Keep cutting. Oh, you have to reallocate? You have to reallocate, and you have to give some of this work to mental health care professionals or social workers, or hey, you've got to create another task force because that is unarmed because you can't pay for all those weapons. That's okay. Keep defunding, and the communities will tell you when it's enough.
Exactly. Yeah. How many cases have we seen where the difference between life and death was the fact that cops showed up? And if they just hadn't, what's the worst that would have happened?
Yeah.
The drive-through line might have been blocked for a few minutes. God forbid.
I don't even think he was blocking the drive.
I don't even know.
Yeah,
you're 100% right. Nothing would have happened. That's what would have happened. Absolutely nothing. And this is like hypothetically, like if you defunded the police, if you remove them from the vast majority of the responsibilities that they now hold, that they did not hold initially, there's no understandable rational reason why they would intervene in these sorts of situations. There's so many involving mental health and homeless and all of that just bringing someone who is packing and has been trained that that's the solution to your problems is literally the worst thing that you could do. Leaving the person to their fate could be safer for them, let alone sending an expert who's been trained to actually deal with the problem, rather than to just get there, be trained to be terrified, and respond to any perceived threat, existent or not, with deadly violence.
Absolutely. And I also would just encourage people, I mean, we've talked about this before, to not call the police, but also maybe step up. Like, is there a way without, going full Karen on someone that you can knock on a window of somebody you think might be drunk and just say, hey, how are you doing? You okay? Do you want me to call you a car? Like, I think this goes to, in the absence of police, being able to be a reliable, non-lethal entity.
Yeah.
And in the absence of anything else like it, maybe we all have to step up and make sure that people are okay. Again, without being too nosy into, without discriminating our own selves. But, rather than calling the cops, hey, maybe just check in with someone.
Wilson B says, during protests, first rally at City of Black Wall Street massacre scheduled for Juneteenth, RNC acceptance in Jacksonville, Florida on anniversary of Axe Handle Saturday. So I think that the Tulsa thing has been pushed to the next day. So it's still there, I believe, but it's not on the same day at least. So, which is actually interesting when you think about it, because Francesca, how many times can you think of where Donald Trump and his administration does something seemingly explicitly designed to stoke this sort of thing?
Yeah.
And there's pushback, and then they back off?
Never.
That doesn't really happen.
There's vaguely something that something military related, but no, I don't think that ever. I mean, it's like, yes, we're in a moment. Maybe we're in that moment where this president is capable of shame.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, so my dog wants to go outside. I'm gonna have to let her out in a second. But anyway, those eyes are they're longing to be outside. Okay, so. Backing off is so out of character for him that I have to start to fill in the blanks and try to figure out what is it that led to this. And I think one thing could be that maybe it is actually getting through to him that this whole situation across the country is actually bad for him electorally, that if he continues to keep poking everyone, that's not actually in his best interest, no matter what he says publicly. The other is that potentially he feared that holding it on Juneteenth in Tulsa could lead to massive counter-protests outside of the rally, which hypothetically is the sort of thing that normally he likes. He likes to sort of give his followers something to fight over. But he doesn't seem to want this one. And so again, I think it comes back to, does he actually think that continuing what's going on is hurting him electorally? First of all, I think it is hurting him. And more surprisingly, he seems to be getting that.
Yeah. I still don't know if it's going to be enough to avoid some sort of violence or something going on. I'm very scared for what will happen in Tulsa. And I hope that people stay safe and stay protected.
Even after changing it, you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, when I heard that it was changed, I assumed it was either completely a different weekend. But the fact that it's coming on the back of Juneteenth, right, which is Emancipation Day, and there will be a lot of Black Lives Matter protesters. I'm dubious as to whether he's going to completely avoid it. And yeah, he did it because it's not as symbolic, but I think, Trump never likes to not stoke violence with his base.
Yeah, 100%.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
You might recall that back during the 2016 election, Donald Trump decided to reassure the country that he was not your stereotypical Republican in one particular area. When it comes to the LGBT community, he's a real friend, he said. He said that in 2016. He said effectively the same thing, by the way, in response to the massacre at Pulse, by the way, at that time, the worst mass shooting. And despite trying to reassure the community after that horrendous act of violence, many people noted that last Friday, the anniversary of it, they decided to revoke transgender health protections, not only during Pride Month, but specifically on an important anniversary. It was just a week of let's find anniversaries to exploit for maximum cruelty, which is weird because he was a friend of the community. But while that is bad news, there is a little bit of good news this morning, and that is a recent SCOTUS decision. This morning, the court said that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which makes it illegal for employers to discriminate because of a person's sex, among other factors, also covers sexual orientation and transgender status. It upheld rulings from lower courts that said discrimination based on those factors was a form of sex discrimination. So we're going to have more details on this, but this is overall very important because there was a lot of reason to believe that this court would not rule in that way. And also, especially considering what we just talked about from last Friday, this potentially could in the future invalidate that rule's change as well. So, for all that they say they're going to be a friend of the LGBT community, they have been anything but. And in this case, the Justice Department was on the other side. They wanted the continued discrimination. And so, Francesca, we almost never have good news, but today is apparently good, at least in this area.
Yeah. Who would have thought? This is Mike Pence and Donald Trump are, despite their best efforts and their Supreme Court Justice nominee Neil Gorsuch, they're not totally morally bankrupt. Like, it is obvious that any kind of anti-discrimination laws, especially in the workplace, should absolutely apply to LGBTQ people and trans people specifically. This administration's been so deliberately cruel to the trans community, whether it's military bans or whether it's just the bathroom BS that continues to be this trigger for the right for some reason, to stripping healthcare protections from transgender people, and now this. And I really hope that it's been long fought for, and I hope it's something that can be expanded on, because there is no legal way that you could discriminate against someone in the healthcare industry. And if there is, then that is even more of a reason for Medicare for all, because we should all be treated equally under the law, and no corporation should say that some sort of religious or, whatever, their bankrupt religion tells them that they should discriminate against queer people or trans people.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know that we go over this over and over again, but it is 2020, and we have to be shocked that the government's like, no, I don't think that you can just, fire someone the second you find out that they're LGBT. 2020. Like, we're supposed to be flying around in jet cars, and we're trying to get this basic level of respect. But thankfully, considering how conservative this court has gone, it is a surprise, the fact that Gorsuch, once Kennedy was gone, and Kennedy was sort of on the borderline, there was a lot of fear. And who knows how they could go in the future. And it's not like the court's all of a sudden seen the light. They had a horrendous environmental decision this morning, too, involving a pipeline. But this is good. And I don't want to get too excited, but I kind of feel like, sort of in the midst of all of these protests, one of the things that it's given me the most optimism is the strong inclusion of representation for and respect for, that this isn't just Black Lives Matter, but specifically recognition of violence against Black and brown transgender individuals as well. And I feel like if the Supreme Court isn't going to give the right everything that they want on that, and you see what's happening in the streets, I kind of feel like they lost that battle against the trans community. Like, it's still, obviously, there's a huge amount of discrimination, a huge amount of violence, but I kind of feel like things are potentially changing very fast. That we're not having those same stupid conversations constantly about bathrooms. I know that there's still going to be legal stuff, but I feel like the right might be losing in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of like gay marriage, right? There's a threshold that we've passed that we will not go back on. And I also think it shows you're absolutely right. This is a moment where, especially the young people in the streets, I love Gen Z. I mean, you're adorable on TikTok, etc. I don't even know how to make fun of you anymore. All I'm saying is you have no tolerance, and rightfully so, for racist police and discrimination against LGBTQ people, and as it should be. And this is, I mean, the Civil Rights Act, under which, this ruling was passed in terms of how it does protect LGBTQ people, 1964. So it's like, and the fights that we saw then to get the Civil Rights Act are the similar fights we're seeing now in the street to actually ensure that it is so, that there is equal treatment under the law, that there isn't discrimination. Yeah. And it pains me, and yet it inspires me to know that, this is 60 years later that we're trying to make good on these laws that were so hard fought. And if you told someone back in 64 that it was going to take until the year 2020 to get equal protections and then some, I mean, it's a long time to wait. And yet sometimes history speeds up. And I think we're in that moment where history's speeding up, and all that groundwork that's been laid is actually going to pay off. So hats off to everyone who's worked so hard on that particular bill, and all the trans people who've put their lives on the line. Yeah. And I just want to say, like, for those of you who don't know how important this is, I think that especially transgender youth, especially if you're trans and you're trying to get a job, that the ways that being denied a regular job then pushes you into more and more precarious things, whether that's sex work or drugs, et cetera. It's just all ways that trans people are more criminalized because they're not accepted into the mainstream workforce. So this is absolutely a win for their protection. Exactly.
I mentioned some of the other decisions. I'll just briefly say they also declined to take up a potential case where they could have ruled on qualified immunity, which theoretically could have done, at least something to help reform police. They're backing off of that. I guess they're not that interested. There are certain things that they're really interested. Like, for instance, I thought this was amazing. So we were surprised that Gorsuch sided on the side of protecting LGBT rights here. Alito and Kennedy and Kavanaugh voted against it. Not super shocking. Kavanaugh might have been drunk for all we know. But anyway, Gorsuch's opinion for the majority was 29 pages long. Alito and Kavanaugh wrote dissents together. It was 138 pages. Like, does it take 138 pages to effectively say in complicated legalese, screw gay people? That's effectively what it is. But anyway,
I would love to read that. I do think it's important to follow that thread. You should read it. We should all read that, because it is some BS legalese. Yeah. That also, again, gets used in all these religious liberty laws that have been sweeping the country, probably in states for people who are watching now, that are all based on, again, just the right to discriminate because my God says you're a sin. Yeah. Anyway.
Kavanaugh. Susan Collins, she must be so disappointed. I mean, she thought he's really learned his lesson. He's going to be better in the future. Man, Collins needs to lose.
I like beer.
Okay, let me ask you this. If you got to press a button and one button Trump loses, the other button McConnell and Collins loses, which do you press?
I mean, you do it with your elbow and you hit both.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
button mash.
I guess that's true, but it would feel good. I would love McConnell to lose. Oh, that would. To see the sad look on his turtle face.
Yes, no, it's true. If Trump had to win and McConnell loses, then seeing the next 4 years of just sort of like the moment in Wizard of Oz where the witch gets wet and it's like, oh, what a world, what a world, what a world. That would be fun. But 4 years of it is too much.
That's true. And it's easy to my knee jerk would be like, well, okay, so let's say hypothetically the Democrats took over the Senate, then basically nothing would happen for 4 years, but that's not true.
No, we'd go to war with Iran.
Security together, and he would definitely take us to war. There's so much he could do.
Yeah,
as well as, yes. 4 more years of, let's just dig up everything and burn it. There would be 4 more years of that. No, it would be an absolute disaster. I take back everything I almost said. Although much of the country has apparently forgotten that we're still in the middle of a pandemic and that thousands of people are coming down with new cases every day and lots of people are still dying, we do have to bear in mind that even once people have recovered from coronavirus, that does not mean that they are free of consequences, as many people are finding out financially. I want to go through just a couple of the excessive bills that people have received following their successful recovery from coronavirus. The first is Janet Mendez, who started receiving bills soon after returning in April to her mother's home from Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital, where she nearly died of COVID-19. First, there was a bill for $31,165. The next one was impossible to ignore, an invoice for $401,885.57, although it noted that thankfully the hospital would be paying for a significant chunk of that as a financial assistance benefit, but her tab was still, for that bill, $75,000, all told over $100,000. Now, hopefully the insurance company is going to take care of some of this, because apparently there have been so many phone calls to the hospital about it that they have decided they're going to cover a portion of it. It will still leave a significant bill, and that is where everything lines up right. That the hospital does what they're supposed to do, that the insurance helps out. You could still be financially broken, even after successfully living through the terrifying experience of coronavirus. So we're going to have others, but Francesca, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this. This financial part, I don't think enough people are really talking about.
No, especially when there were promises to assist and help out with any kind of COVID treatment or hospital stays. And there was money allotted in one or the two, or maybe I think it was the very first phase of the stimulus budget. And I think if you followed that money, you know that a lot of the hospitals that have been receiving that money are private hospitals, and they've been in turn laying off a bunch of people in order to cover these costs, when actually they could just cover the cost. They would just have to take less of an income. They would have to make less profit. These are profit-making hospitals. The entire model, when you look at these bills, right, you see that the gouging that is going on, the price gouging, the sort of like the layers of feeding and profiteering off of whether it's, well, we had to transport you to this room and then we had to do this x-ray and we had to do that test and we had to do this. Everyone is eating off of this privatized healthcare system, and it's falling on the backs of the patients. Yeah. And if it's not falling on the backs of the patients, it's falling on the backs of the taxpayers who are giving this stimulus money to these hospitals, rather than saying to the hospitals, nah, you're just gonna actually have to make a sacrifice. You make the sacrifice.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it really, in the end, it will come down to who pays. But we're going to have another individual I'm going to turn to in a second. And the human cost is the true cost. But I do want people to acknowledge, one of the reasons I want to talk about this is that, let's say, cases are going up in a number of states. I know that, you might think Texas must be doing okay because Ted Cruz spent the last 24 hours arguing with Ron Perlman about wrestling Jim Jordan. That's literally a thing that's happening right now. But no, Texas is seeing skyrocketing hospitalizations from coronavirus. Now, the biggest issue with that is that almost certainly more people are going to begin to die in some states. Arizona, Florida, Texas, all states are getting hit very hard. But also, let's say we've learned a lot about how to treat people. Let's say that the people who are getting sick might not be coming from nursing homes, so maybe they're a little bit less likely to die. They're still going to be in intensive care, on ventilators. Costs are going to be driven up, and someone is going to pay for it. Not to mention the threat of death, and also, by the way, of being maimed for the rest of your life, because apparently many of the people who have successfully recovered from serious cases of coronavirus have organ damage following it. They've lived, but it's not like they just shook off a cold. No, their lungs, they might need lung transplants afterward. So letting it continue to spread in this way isn't just irresponsible in terms of the death toll that it might result in, but also the significant human cost in quality of life, and also the significant medical expenses that someone is going to pay for at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, we know the ways that medical debt then impacts the economy as a whole, right? We're always taught to look at unemployment, and we're always taught to look at the stock market. Oh, the stock market is going to tell us whether the economy is good. No, check out how many people are suffering with medical debt. How many people have become homeless because they couldn't pay their medical debt and then couldn't pay their mortgages or their rents. And we have an incredible wave of evictions, of a housing crisis coming at us, and then compounded with the medical debt associated with COVID. And again, there is some relief for that. But like John's saying, it is going to be lasting. Like you don't just get over this.
Yeah.
I guess I just think what we're doing to the prison industrial complex and the policing, whatever, like our policing in this country, let's do to the healthcare industry what we're doing to policing right now. Yeah. All right. The whole thing must go. The private healthcare industry has got to go. All right. You can no longer make money off of us because absolutely, whether or not you're shooting people down in the street, you are effectively killing poor people and predominantly people of color because of how expensive and how inaccessible the healthcare industry is, the private healthcare industry is. Yeah. So I say we should, while we're at it, let's get rid of it.
Yeah. Oh, Bernie.
Oh, Bernie.
And I just want to quickly mention another case. So there was one individual, Michael Floor. He spent 62 days in intensive care because of COVID-19, induced coma. His bill was $1.1 million. The total cost is almost certainly going to be higher because apparently the bill that he got, the $1.1 million, doesn't include things like dialysis, the nursing facility, and stuff like that. So it's going to be even more. His bill was 181 pages, basically the same as the dissents that we talked about earlier. 3,000 different itemized charges. Now, the good little end to this story is that he believes that the vast majority of it will likely be paid for because thankfully he is covered by Medicare, but a lot of people are not going to be. And a lot of people are going to find that when they get their bill with 3,000 itemized things, their hospital is going to pick and choose which they pay for. They're going to fight and drag it out for as long as possible. So when you get out of the hospital from COVID-19, you not only have, lifelong medical issues you're going to have to deal with, but you get to deal with the bureaucracy that's been set up in the provision of healthcare. And best case scenario, you only have to pay tens of thousands of dollars. But God help the people who don't receive so much scrutiny that the hospitals decide to pay it off, that the insurance decides, you know what, we've done 6 months of this. I really don't feel like paying for 70% or 80% anymore. And that is almost certainly coming. We got multiple crises on the horizon, and that is one that I don't hear nearly enough conversation about.
No, and watch the money, because after all this, even, now, by the end of this year, we're absolutely going to see healthcare CEOs, the heads of private healthcare companies making bank, the billions of dollars. I mean, there was something like $8 or $9 billion that like the top handful of healthcare CEOs made in 2017, something like this, like in the billions and billions of dollars, right? We're going to see that COVID is making people rich at our expense.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things that we're like, well, what's going to last? How are our lives going to change after the pandemic is over? No more private healthcare. I want to leave that behind, please.
Hopefully.
Please, if I just ask nicely enough.
Yeah, exactly. What American politics is needed is people to be more polite. People out of power need to be more polite. Absolutely. That's actually what Fox has been saying. Anyway, people have been waiting to see Donald Trump. When it comes to the protests, when it comes to law enforcement, what is he going to actually do? Because he said things, but what actual reforms does he support? Don't get your hopes up. I want to give you just a couple of the quotes from his recent appearance on Fox News with Harris Faulkner. And here is what he had to say about effectively one of the things that launched us into this period in history on chokeholds. Trump said, "I think the concept of chokehold sounds so innocent, so perfect. And then you realize if it's a one-on-one. But if it's a two-on-one, that's a little bit a different story. Depending on the toughness and strength, we're talking about toughness and strength. There's a physical thing here too." To which Harris Faulkner said, "If it's a one-on-one for the officer's life," and Trump says, "and that does happen, you have to be careful." So that's terrible. From start to finish. He starts off by saying that the concept of chokehold sounds so innocent, so perfect. What is that? What is that supposed to mean? Innocent and perfect. The concept of chokehold, not to mention the weird lack of grammar and inability to express his thoughts, but then Harris Faulkner, who had criticized him a couple of times through the course of this interview, she says, what if it's a one-on-one for the officer's life? Now, we have seen multiple people die as the result of police using chokeholds in states where they're legal, in states where they're illegal. I have never seen a case where the cop was in fear of his actual life. It was one cop against one assailant, and the cop had to put a chokehold on them to save his life. In every case, it has been a group of cops bearing someone to the ground, and then either a chokehold or a knee to the neck, long after the person has been pacified, for many minutes, as the person is telling them, I will literally die if you don't stop this.
Mm-hmm.
But Harris Faulkner pretends that, no, this is mortal combat between two individuals, and this is the only option.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is the fallacy about fearing for your life. I mean, I think the answer is not better training, but if you've ever seen training simulations, they're always the most outlandish and ridiculous, like active shooter situations that are 99% not what these police officers are stopping people for. They're stopping people for selling a loose cigarette outside of a convenience store, potentially using a counterfeit $20 bill, sleeping in their car. And when I say people, of course, I mean Black Americans. Like these are the pettiest things that they are stopping people for. And to even be in the vicinity to get a chokehold on someone means that you were able to approach them, right? Like, I haven't seen some crazy, Bruce Lee type moves. Like, we haven't seen some crazy moves for someone to get to the chokehold stage.
Yeah.
Right? No, it's always been like talk, and then grab them or sit on their neck for 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Just the complete dehumanization. Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Trump is a total idiot. He has no coherent thought, and he doesn't even know what his fall line is for this moment. Like, he doesn't know what he's supposed to say.
Exactly. Yeah. He, like I said earlier in the show, I think he gets that he has really botched this, and I think he's starting to realize that it might hurt him electorally, but that doesn't mean that he's smart enough or can feign empathy enough to say, even enough to just get through the period. I don't mean to actually solve the problem. I don't think he gives a damn about that, but to appear to care. Like, Biden does not have a plan to actually fix any of this, really. But he at least can pretend. For someone who's not extremely online, he seems like he cares about it at the very least. Trump can't even approach that at this point. I mean, Biden is at his own flubs. The fact that his law enforcement reform plan from like a year ago included $300 million in additional funding, and he still wants to do that following, the calls to defund the police. That is stupid too. But I want to illustrate what I've said with an example. So Donald Trump, I'm gonna play this video for you, and I want you to pay attention to the question and the answer. What is the question about, and what does he say in response to it? And understand that the response is buffoonish, but also doesn't in any way answer the question. So here is a question from Harris Faulkner.
Does all of that fit into talking with the protesters and people right now wanting for the Black community, and not just Blacks, but communities of color, people who are disadvantaged in general? I mean, the economy is the great unifier, right?
Well, I think I've done more for the Black community than any other president. And let's take a pass on Abraham Lincoln, because he did good, although it's always questionable. In other words, the end result.
Well, we are free, Mr. President.
But we
he
are
did
free.
pretty well.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah, no,
so I'm going to take a pass on Abe, Honest Abe, as we call him.
But you say you've done more than
anybody.
anybody.
Well, look, criminal justice reform. Nobody else could have done it. I did it.
So the reason I stressed the question and answer was, the question was something to the effect of, all that's going on, people desperately want reform, what are you going to do? And he says, I've done the most of any president. That's not what the question was. First of all, you haven't. It's a lie. But it's not, what have you done? It is, what are we going to do? We're in this moment of history where we're all focusing on law enforcement and the prospects for reform. What are you going to do? And he has to go back to, it's like nerves over, are you questioning what I've done? I've done a lot. I'm going to say the things I've done. which isn't helpful. Not to mention the Lincoln, there's a question of how it turned out in the end. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I think we sort of suspect what it means, but I don't like it.
Yes, he says in the same breath, well, I've done nearly as much as the president who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which ended slavery. I've done nearly as much as that guy. And by the way, that guy maybe didn't do such a great thing. Like, maybe the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't a good thing. Maybe we should, literally, you could have taken that and been like, is he saying we should still have slavery? And I gotta say, I think that some of the reforms that he has made and has done with the prison industrial complex or the prison system have been important, but they've also been very, very minor. And it was thanks to Kim Kardashian going to the Oval Office and smiling for a photo in that just moment of bizarrity that we live in. And that, you could not explain away 10, 15 years ago. But, I mean, let's just remember that, and this is a question, it's I don't know why we want to give Trump some of these wins. I know there was a lot of work put into that piece of reform. Jared Kushner was involved. And I know that, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West were involved. But, why? So he can just tout it in the same breath that he says maybe Lincoln wasn't a good guy, and I'm not going to even address what I've done for the Black community. I guess I'm wondering, and this is the thing with Democrats, is that we have this obsession with working with these angels of death. We have this obsession of making them look good. Okay, we're going to allow Trump to give the State of the Union speech right after he's impeached. No. We're gonna give him this victory on the trade deal, the new trade deal between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico in the middle of an impeachment or whenever that was, and that was Pelosi's doing. No, why are we giving these people these wins when we know they actually don't do enough, they don't go far enough, and they're to uphold some sort of semblance of civility or bipartisanship that the other side doesn't even believe in anymore? I'm done with that. I'm totally done with that.
You are only 100% right. Maybe slightly more than 100%, but you are definitely right. The only other thing I want to say about this is, I wonder, if you go back the last few years, he always says a couple of things. One thing he says is 98% approval rating in the Republican Party, or 95 or whatever. The number changes, and it's not based on any actual poll, but he'll say it. And if he says that any other president has been good, he always says, best since Lincoln or whatever. Right. He always wants to go back to Lincoln. This is the first time I've heard him add that, but, in the end, was it actually a good thing? And I wonder if this is the effect of the Lincoln Project, because they've been attacking him with the label of Lincoln. Is he turning on Lincoln because of those ads that now, all of a sudden, there's a disclaimer on whether Lincoln was good or not? That's new. I think it's because of the Lincoln Project.
I feel like you finally understand his 3-year-old brain, John.
Exactly. It's I can see the Matrix, but it's block letters.
Yes.
maybe.
Bad.
Prepare yourselves. Most important political news of 2020. What is going on with Donald Trump? And I refer here to a couple of different instances over the weekend. One involves his continued struggle to consume liquid. Now, look, this is not the first time that he's had to give a little assist to his coffee, but it is noteworthy. Now, look, I want to say first off, it looks good there. I don't know. So, is this important? I admit it is not, and the ramp even less so. But the reason that I think it's important, we'll jump in.
Ramp more important.
Okay, why don't we see the ramp? Okay,
let's see
talk
ramp.
about this. We're gonna see your water, and we're gonna raise you a ramp, and we're gonna tell you why this might actually matter. I love the music, by the way. Whoop, and there he's off for the races. Okay, so
shake it up.
Okay, so that happened over the weekend. It was, there was a Twitter frenzy over it, a lot of it unproductive, but I have my thoughts. I'll allow you first, Francesca.
No,
what were your thoughts
no.
when you saw this?
You go.
Okay, so here's the thing. Look, on one level, him looking ridiculous. Okay, I want to laugh about that. And I understand that there's a lot of people who feel like they have to be the Buzz Killington of this sort of thing. Like, if you're taking brief pleasure in something that's not entirely rooted in, like, healthcare reform or something, that it's a waste of time. Okay, maybe. But this is a difficult time, and this person has gone out of his way to hurt us substantively and non-substantively as much as possible. If people want to take a brief second to not feel like they're dwelling in a mile-high pool of feces that's on fire, by the way,
Yes,
I'm gonna
don't
let
forget
them
the fire.
do that. Exactly. I'm gonna let them do that. And I might occasionally do it too, okay? So him walking down that ramp and looking ridiculous, is it important? Perhaps not. But schadenfreude is a thing, okay? And I'm gonna feel it, and you can't stop me, okay? So now, Francesca.
Yeah. No, well, I don't know what's going on with the water. I've seen Anthony Atamanik, who does the Trump impression on Comedy Central on the President Show, said that he didn't want to lose his place on the prompter, so he was like too afraid to like lower his face, so he had to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
I love the moment when he holds it and he like realizes he can't get from here to here, like that he's like, oh God, sometimes cups are hard, all right? Straws. What about a presidential plastic straw? They sell them on his website because just to trigger the libs over paper straws. So I don't know why he didn't have a straw, but I do know what's going on with the ramp, and I do know what's going on with everything else. He wears high heels. Mm-hmm. He wears heels, and that is someone walking down a ramp in heels. You have to be careful because you're being thrust forward even more. You're literally always on a ramp anyway.
He does lean forward in photos quite often.
No, he leans forward in photos. His shoes have a tack in the back of them, right? So he looks taller, and you don't see his ginormous gut because he is a disgusting Jabba the Hutt person. So he leans forward all the time because he's wearing heels. He's just straight up wearing heels, guys. Ladies, you know what it's like.
Let me ask you a question, because I have not walked down a ramp in heels. If you're in heels, would that explain why he doesn't walk like step, step, step? He walks step, 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 step.
Oh no, that's idiocy. That's like That's like the 3-year. Like when you were young and you used to climb stairs, you didn't know you could go 1, 2, 3, or your legs weren't long enough.
Yeah. So, look, let me say why I think that this could be consequential, potentially. Okay. Is it important? No. All of the substantive stuff that we talk about every day, that we've talked about already, is far more important, obviously. But I have seen analyses of presidential campaigns that I was not alive for, and when the label of frail gets stuck to you, it seems to do some damage, and it's hard to bounce back from. And there have been multiple cases of that. And in particular, during a campaign in which Trump really wants your perception of Biden to be, he's falling apart, he's losing it. And I will say Biden is making that a little bit easier than perhaps would otherwise be.
I was going to say, yes. I don't know, if frail can attach to someone, then I think Trump's winning again. Cause,
I know, totally. But the last thing he then wants is for that to be nullified by him being seen to have a trouble doing the incredible easy tasks of drinking a fluid and walking down a ramp. And that is why I think he responded so forcefully to the fact that this became a thing over the weekend, tweeting, "The ramp that I descended after my West Point commencement speech was very long and steep, had no handrail, and, most importantly, was very slippery. The last thing I was going to do is fall for the fake news to have fun with. Final 10 feet, I ran down to level ground. Momentum!" Now, that's all ridiculous. It is long, I guess. It's not steep. It's just not. And apparently it was a perfectly fine day. There had been no rain. I don't know what it was slippery from. And he didn't run the last 10 feet. And even if he did, that would be weird. No, he sped up slightly on the last step. It's just such a ridiculous overreach of a response that it tells me that I do think he
something
fears
else
the
is going
label
on.
frail.
Well, okay, so I think heels, but then I did see another video, and maybe you have it, John. When he is walking with former Prime Minister Theresa May.
No, I don't.
Oh God, you guys look this up. So he is in his own White House, walking around, and he's walking with Theresa May, and they come to a ramp. Now, there's no steep ramps at the White House, and I'm assuming they mostly have handrails, and he's walking next to her, and then he grabs her hand. He grabs her hand as he's descending this, like, I don't know, 8-degree ramp.
Hold on a second. You can't really see their feet. They are going down a ramp, you can see. And he's doing the shuffle. He holds her hand and then taps it. I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you. No.
That seemed human for him.
No. He needed to grab go wide. He needed to grab her hand. He doesn't do inclines. He can't do downward slopes.
Downward slope. And oddly enough, he's been on one for quite a while. Exactly. Yeah. So look, and here's the thing. It's not like it's. If it is ridiculous to criticize him for how he walks up or down a ramp, at the very least, it is something that he has opened himself up to, because as is always the case, there's always a tweet. And back in 2014, he tweeted, "The way President Obama runs down the stairs of Air Force One, hopping and bobbing all the way, is so inelegant and unpresidential. Do not fall."
And by the way, Robert Pattinson, you're way too good for Kristen Stewart.
Exactly. It's such a weird... This is what his life was. You know what? I want to return him to that.
Me too.
Anyway, I will say that if I were you, Trump, look, you don't want this video being around and hurting you, so you need to get it out of the news. And you especially don't... When people search Donald Trump walk, you don't want this to show up. So you got to flood the Googles with something else. I would say... Start sending out that video of you walking up the stairs to Air Force One with toilet paper stuck to the bottom of your shoe. And that will distract everyone from the whole ramp thing. Very excited to welcome to the show someone who has appeared on the network, on The Conversation, but has not yet appeared on The Damage Report, running for State Senate in New York's 49th District for the Democratic and Working Families Party. Thearse McCalmon, welcome to The Damage Report.
Thank you, John.
Very excited to have you here. The New York primaries are shaping up to be potentially one of the most consequential. I think one of the most closely watched set of primaries. There's so many important races. And I as we said before, we were talking before we went rolling, some of my audience might not be familiar with you yet, so I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your decision to run and what you're bringing to this campaign.
So, like you said, my name is Thearse McCalmon. I'm a mom. I am an educator, and I'm a former homeowner who lives in Schenectady, which is part of the district. Last year, I ran for mayor, and that was my first campaign, and I lost by only 105 votes against an 8-year incumbent.
Wow.
And that spoke true to me. Yeah, I think it was the most glorious defeat I've ever had. It was like beautiful. It was gorgeous. I know most people don't say that about losing, but it was expected that I wouldn't get 1% of the vote, and I lost by only about 3.9% of the vote. So it really spoke to the fact that the district that I live in, or the portion of the district that I live in, which is Schenectady, the city of Schenectady, the residents were tired of the same old, and I did not put forward like issues and say, these are your issues and this is what I'm going to run on. I asked them what were the issues, and then I screamed that from the mountaintop and said, these are the things that need to change. And I think because of that, that's why I came so close to winning, because they were tired of being ignored, tired of not having someone who was actually their voice and representative, and they wanted something different. So I decided, since the establishment, the Democratic establishment, was very upset that I ran for mayor, and I said, well, I still want to be that effective change. So I had to sit down and think of why I wanted to run for Senate. And these are like just a few things that I've been pretty much I put together. I'm running mostly because there is a desperate need in my community, and the district for a leader who has actual experience with the struggles of real life, like the majority of the people in the district. We don't have that right now. I'm running because Black and brown lives matter, even more so than ever. And I've been saying this for the longest. We currently have an antiquated septuagenarian career politician who has lost all relevant connection to what is actually of importance to the people, the youth, and community as a whole. Mm-hmm. He lacks vision of what matters to real people, and I'm those people. Mm-hmm. You're those people, and everyone in the district and I are what's important and what matters, and he doesn't get that. We've been fighting all our lives and our parents' lives before us to get these career politicians to see that they are there for us, not for their own selfish goals, not to be bought out by big businesses, nor to kill us slowly with defunding our education and Medicare, which they're doing. I'm running because we need healthcare now, yesterday, and last week. We needed it before the pandemic. I'm running because I've always known who our essential workers are and that they deserve not only a living wage, but a proud wage, one that matches their superhero jobs. And that's what we've been calling them now, but they've always been that. Yeah. I'm running because those same essential workers, our heroes, have been denied safe staffing, and you can see that behind me. Contracts worth their time, paid sick leave, which we now have, a union, Walmart, not saying anybody in particular, affordable and accessible health insurance, and minimum wage of at least $15 an hour. I'm running because $1,200 is not enough. It was never enough. Mm-hmm. And we need a universal basic income. I'm running because I've always seen where our truth lies. Who makes up our foundation and our community, our district and our state? I'm running because our time has been stolen and replaced by photo ops and borrowed ideas. I'm running because we need a representative who lives like us, works like us, and struggles like us. And I believe I'm that person.
Well, one of the things that I'm glad that you acknowledge as you're going through all those problems is some of them have been, for some people, more evident in the past few months. The struggle for healthcare seems more significant in a time of pandemic where so many people have died and continue to die. And, the nationwide conversation about law enforcement seems more relevant, but obviously the problems you're talking about are not new either. But for some politicians, they provided an opportunity to potentially at least act like you take it seriously. So in these areas, I'm curious, the current incumbent that you referred to there, Republican James Tedisco, what has his response been to the pandemic, to these protests? Does he seem like with a primary challenge he gets it? I'm guessing no.
I'm sorry. I thought I was going to keep a straight face on that one. Mm-hmm. No, not at all. So when the state went on lockdown, I waited to see what was happening with our leaders. Like, would they, especially I was watching, of course, him very closely, Jim Tedisco, because I wanted to see whether he was going to wake up and see all those things I listed, and there's a whole bunch more, right? If he was going to wake up and recognize that him sitting back on his laurels is not going to make it anymore. He needs to come out, be up front, and lead, and be that guiding voice at a time where none of us knew what the heck was going on. Yeah. We were unsure about everything, and nothing. Weeks went by. And I said to my team, I said, it's going to be hard to campaign. Duh. It's hard, period. I mean, in the middle of petitioning, this is when everything happened. It was hard then. It was even harder to continue because, you have to knock on doors, which we couldn't do any longer. We had to ask people for money, which none of us had the Black heart to do at this time. So I was like, what can we do? So instead, what we did, we decided instead of calling for money that we would call all of our neighbors and our friends and everyone in the district, especially our elderly, and ask them, are you okay? Mm-hmm. Do you need anything? Do you need food? Do you need hand sanitizer? Are your family members okay? Are you unsure about certain things? And then we got answers like, of course, they needed certain things. And we went out and we helped. We went grocery shopping for some people. We helped them get some amenities that they needed for their home. And also, they were like, well, what's going on? Are we going to get, this is later on, are we going to get that stimulus check? Or are we going to get this? Or what's going on? And we had to keep sending them to all these different sections of the internet, and most of them didn't have internet. And I said to my team, what we need to do is gather all of this information and put it in one place so that if they are able to access that information, they can just go to one page on my website, the COVID-19, one of the first ever out of all the campaigns. And I mean, even before the governor started his, and we put everything on one page for every part of the district that had that information available. And then we still continue to make calls to those people who did not have access and said, these are the things that you need to know about certain things, even down to their fur babies. We made sure that everything that they needed to know was there. Where was our current representative? Checking ticks on his cat. Like, that's the picture that he posted. And then eventually he decided he was going to give awards to the heroes months later.
Yeah.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much for recognizing these people who have been doing this since before the pandemic. And thank you for recognizing their hero jobs now. But a lot of them still can't pay rent. And I definitely cannot take that award to my landlord and said, I'm sorry, I can't pay your rent, but my senator thinks I'm great. Yeah. Like, you need to do more, and you're not doing much. Now he's handing out hand sanitizer. Needed that back in March. What happened? Like, What are you doing? Like, he's just waking up.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you've been in there for so long that you forgot what you were there for, and you forgot what you're supposed to be doing for us.
Yeah. You know, if you end up in, state government in New York, obviously one of the big challenges going forward will be what's going to happen with law enforcement. And it seems like at every level there's a huge resistance to almost any change. I've been watching to see what different cities and states have been doing, and I know that, like, New York outlawed chokeholds, even though I had been told that it was outlawed literally years ago. I guess it needed to be done again. I don't know. So I know that you've been speaking at Black Lives Matter rallies. This is obviously a huge thing going forward. What's your vision for, what impact you could have on law enforcement in New York?
So I've been asked to speak, and I've given a few speeches, and I've also participated in some online Zoom conversations. And just recently, I was in a conversation with a couple of other elected officials, and they spoke about 50-A, which has been repealed. Tedisco has gone against that. He voted no, and I think that's anti-police, because why wouldn't you want your police officers or your police force being held accountable for their actions or abusive practices in the community? And also they spoke about defunding police, and that term sounds like we want to just never ever pay police officers. No, and an elected official pointed this out. He said when he was mayor in his previous careers, a lot of the time they had to take that funding and buy ammunition. Every year they were told to buy ammunition. But what did you need that for? Like, why are you militarizing your police force against civilians? Like, what war are you preparing for? So defunding means that we're taking money from buying bullets and actually putting those millions back into the community for community safety, for community support, maybe some health services, mental health services, human services that will actually support people during crises. So when someone's having a mental breakdown, instead of putting those millions into police force to come and tackle them or tase them or even shoot and kill them, instead a healthcare worker, a mental health care worker or a social worker goes out there and handles that crisis. So that's what defunding police means, and that's what we need to do. And they also mentioned that police officers, all of them, no matter what color they are, have certain set of biases. I mean, people do, right? We all do. We have a certain way that we look at other people who don't look like us or speak like us or even worship like us, and that's just human beings. But then we learn, right? So, but as a police officer, you're set to a higher standard. So, but they're human. So they work off of their biases. But what we should do is not just that implicit bias training. And I said this before when I was running for mayor. police officers need to go through a culturally responsive training. And what that does is at first it helps them to recognize what they have within them that's preventing them from doing their job without their bias supporting their decisions. So they have to recognize their racism, their biases, and then work through that and figure out how to stop it at the door before they go and take and do their job. And it's more to it, but they have to understand the community that they're policing before they go to police them. And I wrote this kind of this law when I was an intern at the Senate, and it was about culturally responsive training, but for teachers, because as an educator, and I am, you need to understand the community of your classroom before you go to teach it. You can't teach what you don't know. And that's the same thing with anybody in the service job. You cannot serve what you don't know, especially if you have certain biases against it. And I'm going to continue saying this until we get it done. You need to have culturally responsive training if we're going to have police officers who are not recruited from the communities that they're policing. It has to happen.
It makes a ton of sense. Well, look, it's going to be, I'm sure, for you and for the district, an exciting last week running up to an incredibly consequential election. If someone watching this wants to find out more about your background and your platform, where can they get that information?
They can go to thearesaforsenate.com. I'm not sure if you're going to have that up, but
I think we're going to add that.
That's how you spell my name. It's spelled slightly different. It's a little Irish Catholic, but it's thearesaforsenate.com. You can also contact me. My phone number is on the website. You can call me. I'm totally accessible. You can email me at thearesaforsenate@gmail.com. You can find me on all social media platforms, well, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, mostly those. And I'm totally open to having a conversation and learning what I don't know so that I can represent you properly.
Awesome. Theresa, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.